What if the shadows of your past came knocking at your door one ordinary morning? What if the man you thought you'd lost forever walked back into your life with a single phone call? What if admitting who you really are was the only way to finally be free? The phone rang at 7:14 a.m., cutting through the quiet of my Chicago apartment like a siren I had spent 10 years trying to forget. I stared at the unknown number, coffee mug halfway to my lips, and something in my chest tightened the way it used to when I was 22 and terrified of being seen. I answered anyway. Caleb Thompson? The voice was calm, professional, Midwest flat. Detective Ramirez, Illinois State Police Cold Case Unit. We've reopened the Harper disappearance. New evidence surfaced. We need you at the station this afternoon. 10 years. 10 years since Wesley Harper vanished from our small hometown of Riverton, Illinois. Population 8,400, where cornfields stretched like walls and secrets festered like open wounds. I had been the last person seen with him. The town knew we were close. Too close for two boys who played varsity baseball and quoted the same movies. When he disappeared after our final argument behind the old grain elevator, the rumors turned vicious. Lovers quarrel, they whispered. That Thompson kid lost it. I was arrested, questioned for 48 hours, then released when no body turned up and no hard evidence stuck. But the damage was done. My father changed the locks. My mother stopped answering my calls. The scholarship I had lined up for the University of Illinois evaporated overnight. I packed a duffel bag, drove north on I-55, and never looked back. Now, at 32, I had rebuilt something that looked like a life. Graphic designer for a downtown ad agency, apartment with exposed brick and a view of the river, a circle of friends who knew I was gay but never pressed for details. I dated quietly, never letting anyone close enough to ask about the scar on my heart that still spelled WSLEY in faded ink. I told myself I was fine. Until that phone call. I drove to the state police annex in a daze, the city blurring past the windows. The building smelled of burnt coffee and old paper. Detective Ramirez was shorter than I expected, Hispanic, with kind eyes that had clearly seen too much. He slid a folder across the table. We found a letter, Mr. Thompson, sealed in a safety deposit box Wesley rented under a different name in St. Louis 3 days before he vanished. It's addressed to you. My hands shook as I opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, impatient, the same loops I used to trace with my finger on his bare shoulder in the dark cab of his pickup truck. Caleb, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I couldn't stay. Not in Riverton. Not with my dad threatening to send me to that conversion camp and your dad ready to disown you. I took the bus west. I needed you to live your life without me dragging you down. Please forgive me for leaving you to take the blame. I love you. I always will. W. I read it twice, then 3 times, the words swimming. Wesley was alive. He had chosen to disappear rather than face what we were. And the whole town, my family, had spent a decade believing I had hurt him. Detective Ramirez leaned back. We're bringing him in for questioning. He's been living in Denver under the name Wes Harlan. Changed his name legally. No criminal record. But the case file stayed open because no body, no closure. Now we have one. I left the station numb, the letter burning a hole in my coat pocket. Back in my apartment, I sat on the floor and cried for the first time since the night they slapped cuffs on me outside the Riverton courthouse. The tears weren't just for the lost years. They were for the boy I had been, the boy who had loved another boy so fiercely that he let the world crucify him to protect the secret. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory rushed back. The first time Wesley kissed me behind the bleachers after a game, tasting of Gatorade in fear. The way he'd whisper, "I've got you," when my father's voice got too loud at dinner. The last night we fought because he wanted to run and I wanted to stay and fight for us. I had chosen silence. He had chosen flight. Now the truth was coming home, and I had no idea what it would cost me this time. 2 days later, the doorbell rang at 6:17 p.m. I opened it expecting my neighbor with the usual Ms. Delivered mail. Instead, Wesley stood there, taller than I remembered, shoulders broader from whatever life he had built in Colorado. His hair was longer, sun-bleached at the ends, and his eyes, the same hazel that used to make my stomach flip, were red-rimmed and uncertain. He wore a faded Denver Broncos hoodie and carried a backpack like he might bolt again. "Caleb," he said, voice cracking on my name. I didn't invite him in at first. I just stared, the hallway light catching the faint scar on his left eyebrow from the time we crashed his dirt bike at 16. 10 years compressed into a single heartbeat. Finally, I stepped aside. We sat at opposite ends of my couch like strangers. He told me everything. How his father had found the letters we wrote each other hidden in the barn. How the man had driven him to the bus station at gunpoint. Not literally, but close enough with threats. How Wesley had bought a ticket to St. Louis, rented the box, mailed the letter, then kept moving until Denver felt far enough. He had worked construction, then got his welding certification, built a quiet life. Never dated anyone seriously. Never told a soul who he really was. I saw the news when they reopened the case, he said. I almost didn't come. But I owed you this. I owed you the truth in person. I wanted to be angry. I had rehearsed the speech 1,000 times. How he had left me to rot. How I had lost my family, my hometown, pieces of myself I still couldn't name. Instead, I felt something softer, heavier. Grief for both of us. My dad died last year, I told him. Heart attack. Mom called once, drunk, to say he never forgave me for shaming the family name. She still won't speak to me. Wesley winced. I'm sorry. We talked until the city lights flickered on outside the window. He asked about my job, my friends, whether I was seeing anyone. I asked about Denver, about the mountains, about whether he ever thought about coming back. The conversation felt like walking across thin ice, careful, testing each step. When he finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. I never stopped loving you, Caleb. Not for one day. But I was so scared of what loving you meant in that town. I thought running would save us both. I closed the door after him and leaned against it, heart hammering. The letter had cleared my name legally. But emotionally, nothing felt resolved. The next morning, the local news in Riverton picked up the story. Missing man found alive, former suspect exonerated. My phone started buzzing with numbers I had deleted years ago. Cousins. Old teammates. Even my mother's sister. Everyone wanted the scoop on the gay scandal that had torn our town apart. I called in sick to work and drove south instead, toward the place I swore I'd never return. Riverton looked smaller, sadder. The grain elevator still loomed like a sentinel. I parked outside my childhood home and sat there until the sun dipped low. My mother's car was in the driveway. I didn't knock. Not yet. The police station in Riverton smelled exactly the same, linoleum and desperation. Detective Ramirez had come down from Chicago to coordinate. He introduced me to the new lead investigator, a woman named Lopez who didn't waste time. We need both of you to make formal statements. The media is circling. Your families are already calling. Wesley arrived an hour later, looking like he hadn't slept. We sat in separate rooms, but the walls felt paper thin. I told them everything I remembered. The fight, the way Wesley had screamed that he couldn't live a lie anymore, how I had driven home alone and stared at my ceiling until dawn. I left out the parts that still hurt too much. The kiss we shared right before he walked away, the way his hand had trembled in mine. When we finished, they let us leave together. Outside, a small crowd of reporters waited. One shoved a microphone at me. Mr. Thompson, how does it feel to be officially cleared after being branded a killer for a decade? I answered honestly, like I can finally breathe. But breathing doesn't erase the years I lost. Wesley and I walked to the diner on Main Street, the same one where we used to split milkshakes after games. The waitress recognized us, and her eyes widened. We took a corner booth anyway. Over coffee that tasted like regret, Wesley told me about the nights he had almost called me from payphones in Kansas and Missouri. How he had kept a photo of us in his wallet the whole time, worn soft at the edges. I was a coward, he said quietly. I thought if I disappeared, the town would forget about us. Instead, they turned you into the villain. I reached across the table and touched his wrist, the first time I had touched him in 10 years. His pulse jumped under my fingers. We were both kids. Scared kids. The town, our fathers, they made the rules. We just tried to survive them. That night we walked the old railroad tracks where we used to sneak out and talk about running away together. The stars looked the same. For the first time I felt the weight in my chest loosen, not disappear, but loosen. When he dropped me at my motel, he lingered. I'm staying in town a few more days. Depositions, paperwork. If you want to talk or not talk, I'm here. I wanted both. I wanted to yell, and I wanted to hold him, and I wanted to pretend none of it had happened. Instead, I said, breakfast tomorrow. No pressure. Back in my room, I opened my laptop and started writing for the first time since college. An email to my mother I might never send. Mom, the truth is out. I didn't kill anyone. I was just in love. I still am. I saved it as a draft. The next morning, the Riverton Gazette ran the headline. Cleared. Local man exonerated in decade-old disappearance. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old high school friends who had crossed the street to avoid me in 2014 now wanted to catch up. I ignored most of them. Wesley and I met at the park where we had shared our first real kiss. He brought 2 coffees and a paper bag of donuts like old times. We sat on the same bench, paint peeling in the same pattern. He told me about his life in Denver, quiet, steady, lonely. I told him about Chicago, busy, creative, still lonely. Then he asked the question I had been dreading. Are you seeing anyone? I shook my head. A couple of short things. Nothing that stuck. Every time it got serious, I'd think about you and shut down. He looked at the ground. Same. I tried. Guys who were out and proud and everything I thought I wanted. But none of them were you. The silence stretched, comfortable and terrifying. I finally said what I had practiced in the shower. I don't know what we are now, Wesley. But I know I don't want to lose you again. Not to fear, not to distance, not to anything. He smiled, small and real. Me neither. That afternoon, we drove out to the Harper family farm. Wesley's mother cried when she saw him. His father, older, grayer, still carrying the same rigid posture, stood on the porch and didn't speak. Wesley walked up alone. I waited in the car. When he came back 20 minutes later, his eyes were wet, but his shoulders were straighter. He said he's sorry. Not for everything, but for the gun and the threats. It's a start. We spent the rest of the day driving the back roads, windows down, radio playing the same country songs we used to hate. At sunset, we pulled over at the overlook where the whole town spread out below us like a toy set. Wesley reached over and took my hand. No words. Just the warmth of skin I had dreamed about for 10 years. That night, back at the motel, we talked until 3 a.m. About therapy I had started in Chicago. About the support group he joined in Denver. About how being gay in America in the 2010s had felt like walking a tightrope with no net. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. The closeness was enough. The final deposition was set for Friday. The whole town seemed to hold its breath. My mother showed up at the station unannounced. She looked smaller than I remembered, hair dyed too dark. She didn't hug me. She just said, "Your father was wrong about a lot of things." I was scared. I'm still scared. But I'm proud of you for surviving. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. I took it. Wesley's statement was longer. He laid out every detail. The threats, the bus ticket, the letter. When he finished, the room was quiet. Detective Lopez closed the file. Case closed. Mr. Thompson, you are officially exonerated. No charges, no suspicion. Ever. Outside, the reporters had tripled. Cameras flashed. I stepped to the microphone they thrust at me and spoke from the heart. 10 years ago, I lost my family, my hometown, and the man I love because I was afraid to be who I was. Today, the truth came out. I didn't kill Wesley Harper. I loved him. And love isn't a crime. To every kid still hiding in a small town somewhere, keep going. The world gets bigger. The truth gets louder. You are not alone. Wesley stood beside me, not touching but close enough that I could feel his warmth. Later, in the parking lot, he turned to me. I'm selling my place in Denver. I want to come back to Chicago. Not to pick up where we left off, because we're different people now, but to build something new. If you'll have me. I kissed him then, right there under the streetlights, the first time in 10 years. It tasted like coffee and second chances and the future neither of us had dared to imagine. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my Chicago apartment watching the river sparkle. Wesley's boxes were still stacked in the corner, half unpacked, but his boots were by the door and his coffee mug sat next to mine in the sink. We had fallen into a rhythm. Morning runs along the lake, quiet evenings on the couch, therapy twice a month together. Some nights we talked about Riverton. Some nights we didn't need to. My mother had visited once. She met Wesley, shook his hand, and cried in the kitchen when she thought we couldn't see. Progress. Wesley's father still kept his distance, but his mother sent a Christmas card with both our names on it. Small miracles. I had started volunteering at the local LGBTQ youth center, telling my story to teenagers who looked at me the way I once looked at the few out adults I had known. Wesley found work at a fabrication shop downtown. On weekends, we drove out to the dunes and walked the beach, hand in hand, no longer hiding. One evening, he found the unsent email I had written to my mother all those months ago. He read it silently, then folded the laptop shut and pulled me into his arms. "You don't have to send it," he said. "But you can. Whenever you're ready. I'll be right here." I looked at the man who had once run away to save me and had now run back to find me. The boy I fell in love with was still in there, but so was the man he had become, stronger, gentler, braver. And I was different too. No longer the scared kid behind the bleachers. I was Caleb Thompson, cleared, out, and finally free. We stood there watching the city lights come on. Two men who had survived the worst their small town could throw at them and still found their way home to each other. The past was closed. The future was wide open. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what it might hold. In writing this story, I wanted to show that truth, no matter how delayed, has the power to heal what shame tried to destroy. The real lesson is simple. Hiding who you are only gives fear more time to grow, but stepping into the light, even years later, lets you finally breathe. Love isn't the problem, silence is. To anyone still carrying secrets that weigh like stones, know this: someone out there is waiting to walk beside you when you're ready. You are enough. You always were. And the world, for all its noise, is bigger and kinder than the small towns that tried to shrink you. Keep going. The truth is coming for you too.